Hi guys, welcome to our show Montserrat Moves. I am your host, Davika Rodney, and today we have our very first guest, Miss Cody Greenwood. Miss Cody, can you introduce yourself to the audience by telling them a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. This is a real honour to be the first guest on this podcast. My name is Cody Greenwood and I am a documentary film producer, and I've recently done a film about Air Studios in Montserrat.
So far in your career, you have worked across TV series, short documentary, feature documentary, and TV documentary projects for broadcasters such as the Disney Channel, ABC2, SBS, and NITV. What made you take the leap and start your own company, Rush Films, in 2016?
I think it was several things. I had been working a lot overseas. I was living in LA, I was living in London, I was living in Sydney. And so I was working for a number of different producers and learning a lot, but I sort of realized that I wanted to tell my own stories, and I was working with some really amazing film directors, and we sort of said, we should start making our own films. It came at a really good time because the first project that I started working on was this film, Under the Volcano. So I was lucky that I started the company then, and I wasn't working for somebody else when I had the idea.
On the 18th December 2018, the Australian government-backed body Screen Australia announced that they would be funding the production of 18 documentary projects. One of those was Under the Volcano. What motivated you to apply for funding to make the documentary?
We're really fortunate here in Australia that we have government funding bodies, Screen Australia and Screen West, who are really supportive of the film industry. And I think what motivated us to go to Screen Australia in the first place was that we were going to be doing the film out of Australia. So as much as it's a story of the Caribbean and London, but it was an Australian team. So that was probably the first reason. And the second was that, probably moving forward in my career, I will be making other Australian films. So it was really important for me to build that relationship with the government funding bodies, which are now, working across a lot of my films.
Your mother, the author and the illustrator, Fran Lizette, lived in Montserrat for several years in the 1980s. And you also visited the island 6 or 7 times back then. Can you tell us a little bit about your annual visits to Montserrat?
Sure. Yeah. So my mum lived in Montserrat in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. Mum was because she was an artist, she used to do painting exhibitions at Harmony Hall in Antigua. So mum's family is US based, and we used to come down to the Caribbean for mum's art exhibitions. But then every time we would come to Antigua, we of course had to come over to Montserrat because mum just loves this island so much. So I was here when Plymouth was around. I've got photos of me eating ice cream in the town, and then I've got a lot of memories sort of post-volcano as well, and going on adventures with my family throughout the island.
Did you visit the Air Studios when you visited Montserrat as a child?
No, I didn't as a child, and I think part of that was probably that it was in the exclusion zone during the times when I would visit, because now when we came back to shoot was the first time I think I'd gone that far into the exclusion zone. So but I'd always of course heard all the stories of the studio, so I grew up feeling like I knew it without actually ever seeing it.
What makes a good story, and why is the story of Air Studios Montserrat a good one?
I think what makes a great story is great characters. And when you watch the film, the people of Montserrat are just as, front and stage as the musicians themselves. And so Gracie and I both just fell in love with, you know, Danny and Rose and all the people that we were interviewing. So I think that is probably what is going to really draw people to the film, is great characters, and they're certainly all throughout the film.
Great. Why did you decide to name the documentary Under the Volcano as opposed to something more musical, since it is a music documentary?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and one that has come up for us quite a lot, because it was a name that stuck originally, and I thought maybe this is a temporary title. And then as time went on and we started making the film, we realized that it was really a film about like digging up history from the ashes and the untold story, and it became a bit of a metaphor. And we sort of realized as we were making the film as well that the volcano and when it erupted actually kind of happened at the same time as when the music industry turned digital. So this volcano was actually really representative of the end of the analog days, the end of, you know, all those amazing rock stars having their time in the sun. And then, but it kind of came back to bite us, because when we were talking to our distributor, Universal Pictures, about you know, doing the poster, we couldn't use any images of the studio or an image of a volcano, because it just looked like a nature film. So what we realized was, in all the marketing materials, it very clearly has to say music. We have to have a guitar or a record. At the moment, the poster is a gold record melting in the sun, because if not, people think they're watching a film about volcanoes. So, you know, it's turned out to be quite tricky.
The documentary will be produced by yourself and Richard Harris and directed by Gracie Otto. How did you end up working with Gracie Otto, and why was it important for you to have a female director?
Prior to meeting Gracie, I wanted a female director on the film, and then Richard Harris introduced us and said, you know, Gracie would be really great, because she had done a documentary which was on a British theatre producer called Michael White, and it was the 1960s London. So she dealt with archive and celebrity interviews and all this kind of stuff. So she was really perfect. But yeah, it was really important that the director was female, because we didn't want the film to feel like a boys fan club music doco. So it wasn't really what we were interested in. So and we knew that, you know, most of the people that would be interviewing it would be male. I think so. Yvonne, who was a studio manager, Minetta, who's on the island, Rose, they're really, I think that's it in terms of the female people that we've got on screen. I think I'm sorry if I've forgotten anyone on that list, but yeah, it was, and then the rest of all the other cast is male. So we wanted a female perspective on the story, which I think worked really well. The editor was also female, Karen Johnson. And I think what that's done is given like a bit of a light touch to some of the subject matter. You know, it's not so embedded in technical music history. It's more about, you know, the themes of like people coming together and creativity and all that kind of stuff.
The film features musicians like The Police, Paul McCartney, Duran Duran, The Rolling Stones, Elton John, Earth, Wind and Fire, and the Dire Straits for the film. Would you agree that they were the first remote workers?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first, I mean, my mum might have beat them to it actually, because she was 1978 and she was down there painting, but they were certainly one of the first. And you know, the way that George Martin set up that studio so that people could really focus and wouldn't be interrupted, and you know, that those are all the things that you want when you're trying to find somewhere to work across the world. So he nailed it, and I think what George Martin did, we've all been copying now for decades in the way that we remote work. So yeah, they were definitely the first. If not, Mum might have just snuck in and beat them to it.
Okay. Did you ever ask the musicians why they were able to make so many mega hits in Montserrat?
Yeah, I think it was to do with the fact that they were not interrupted. When a common theme across all the interviews was the productivity of being on Montserrat. So like the Dire Straits, when they talk about Brothers in Arms, they made it in like 3 days or something. And Elton John went down there and he would write by the pool, and everyone in his band was just amazed by how much he could achieve in such a little time. So I think it was a distraction thing. There was no distractions down there. You know, what they would do on their time off is go to Andy's Chicken Shack and drink beers and, you know, but it was really about focus and being productive. And we didn't expect that when we interviewed them, but that was what everybody said.
Great. Which interview was your favorite and why?
Ooh, there's a couple that are probably my favorite in the film. We really love Jimmy Buffett, who just loves Montserrat so much. He was really fun. Gracie and I got stuck in San Francisco because there was no flights leaving, and we had the interview with Jimmy Buffett the next morning at 8 or 9 a.m. And so we had to drive through the night from San Francisco to LA. We left at midnight, got in 7 a.m. to interview Jimmy Buffett. And we were so exhausted by the time we got to that interview, but he was just so much fun that, you know, the fact that we hadn't slept, that we'd driven through the night from San Francisco, you know, we kind of forgot all of that and just had the best time with him. And, you know, afterwards he was like, who do you need to film? I'll interview them all, and was like firing off emails for us. The other guy who I really loved was Stuart Copeland. He's the drummer from The Police. He has just got a really fun energy, and, you know, the Police had all sorts of issues down there and conflict and everything, and he just gave a really candid interview, and I think everyone that watches the film really loves Stuart.
The film has been selected to make its world premiere at the virtual South by Southwest Film Festival in March. That is a big deal. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, we're so excited because when we finished the film, we'd actually missed the submission deadline to get into South by. And I remember realizing that and being like, oh, that sucks, because it would just be such a great festival for this film. I'm so sad that we've missed out on South by. And then by chance, maybe about 6 weeks ago, our distributor Universal Pictures called and said, we've actually been invited for the film to go in there. So they must have heard about it, contacted Universal, asked that we could be in it. And I was like, oh, thank God, because I thought that we'd missed it. But it's just, yeah, it's really exciting. It's the perfect film festival for Under the Volcano because the festival has music roots. It's a music festival as much as it is a film festival. So yeah, we're so excited.
When will the film hit cinema screens internationally?
At the moment, we're talking mid-year. Of course, it's a bit of a strange time with COVID at the moment, with what's happening with cinemas and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I think at the moment the plan is mid-year, but that could change at any time. And I'm hoping that, you know, eventually the film will be in a streaming platform so that's more accessible to everyone watching it that sort of can't get to the cinema because of COVID.
Will you at any point in time host a film premiere here in Montserrat?
Yeah, well, before all this world turned upside down, that was the plan. Gracie and I were going to come back. Mum was going to come back. My dad, my whole family, my brother who loves Montserrat too. We were all going to come back and do a big screening there. So yeah, I'll have to have a chat to you and Venaire about what we can do to host some kind of screening if I can't get there. Oh, I'm so bummed about that. It just would have been so fantastic to set up a big screen and have everyone all together. But yeah, we'll definitely work out a screening there for sure.
Great stuff. What are some of your fondest memories from making the documentary?
So many, because it was such a wonderful experience to make this film. Because, you know, the people I was talking to, I know my whole life, like Danny Sweeney, or they were mum's friends, or, you know, and it's such a positive, feel-good film. So the whole experience was really wonderful. But what I probably loved the most was when we were in Montserrat and I could take these people who didn't have any connection with the island, like Gracie and our cinematographer, and I could take them back to what is my favorite place on the planet, and take them down to Woodlands Beach and all these places that I you know, when I used to talk about Montserrat as a kid, people used to be like, where is that? And what are you talking about? But now I have people that I can call up and say, oh my God, you know, at Danny's shack, this is happening, or down at Woodlands Beach, or do you remember that place that we went to? It's just so nice to have a shared memory of Montserrat with more people than just my family.
What feeling or message do you want people to leave with after watching the documentary?
I think what the film became during the edit process was really a celebration of the creative process. And George Martin put all these wonderful people together and they made great music, but it was all really about people coming together. And so I hope that people leave with an appreciation of the fact that we're better if we create together, and the importance of creativity, how, you know, how hard it can be to create in isolation, because I think this year some people have been, you know, okay with being in isolation and making art, and then others have really struggled with it. And that was the same on Montserrat. Some people, like the police, all went a bit crazy and couldn't quite cope with it. But I hope that people know that that is just part of the process. So yeah, I think that the biggest message that people will leave is just an appreciation, understanding of the way in which we create.
Do you have a vision for ES Studios going forward?
Not really. I know that everybody has different opinions about what they'd like to see done with it. I hope that the film sort of, regardless of what happens to air and the property or whatever, I hope that people, it's going to, you know, it will live on in people's minds more than anything. It is quite a dangerous property, and so that, you know, hence why people aren't encouraged to go and visit. But no, I think for a lot of people, hopefully this kind of ticks that box. They'll feel like they've gone back in time and have seen the studio.
You have another film entitled Sparkle. It made world premiere on the 23rd of January 2021 at the International Film Festival, Flickerfest. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about that?
Sure. That film, it's a beautiful film. It was written by a woman called Tina Fielding, who has Down syndrome, and she also identifies as LGBTQI. So it's a really diverse film, and she wrote it and she stars in it. She's the main actress. And I think it's a really important film because, you know, there's a couple of films where they're starting to cast people with Down syndrome in them, but rarely is it somebody who's also written the project as well. So it's a real celebration of diversity and our differences. So it's really exciting. I'm honored to be a part of that project. I think it's incredible, and I hope that Tina moving forward is going to create more and more films because she's just very, very talented.
How does it feel to have premiered 2 of your films in the same year?
Yeah, it's great because it's a lot of work, you know, to do films, and hopefully I've got another documentary series that will be coming out this year as well that I've been working on called Girl Like You, it's amazing, but it's like, you know, Under the Volcano, I've been working that for 4 years now. Sparkles was 2 years. So it's funny because you make them and then they start to catch up with you with the world premieres of the films. But yeah, it's really exciting.
Why do you love Montserrat? And why should people choose us as their destination of choice for remote working?
Why do I love Montserrat? For so many reasons. I think the people, I just love the people of Montserrat so much. They're like the kindest people on the entire planet, and everybody found that when they came to Montserrat. Like, it was funny because everyone was almost like suspicious at first because everyone was so nice. They're like, why is everyone so nice? There has to be something. And I was like, no, this is the people of Montserrat. They're like nowhere else on the planet. But what was the second part of that question? Why do I love it? And
why should people choose us as their destination for choice?
I just think you have an experience on Montserrat that is like nowhere else in the world. You know, everywhere else feels like it's been spoilt by tourism and all these kind of things, whereas Montserrat is just this untouched gem of a place with the most wonderful people and the best food. And there's nowhere else I can think of that is like Montserrat. And so I think if it's people that want an experience, or to really go back to no hotels, being in villas, all that amazing stuff, then it's the only place you can go in the world for that.
Thank you so much. Our final question for our first episode is, where can our audience find you online?
I have a website. My company is called Rush Films. So I'm on Rush. My Instagram is at Cody Greenwood as well, that I'm on there. Although I don't post as much film stuff. My company's Instagram, Rush Films Co. does. So, I mean, I should be more active online, but I find that I get so bogged down from day to day doing all my producing duties that I forget to be an active participant on social media. I actually got told off the other day. Someone said I wasn't active enough. But people can contact me through any of my socials or on my website. My email's on there. I'd love to hear from the people of Montserrat as well as it all progresses, or if they've got any questions. I've heard from a couple of people so far. And then when the film comes out, I'd love to hear what everybody thinks of it as well. So you have to track me down.
Great stuff. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of Montserrat Moves with your host, Davika Rodney. On the next episode of the show, we'll be featuring the Morton's family, who are working in Montserrat remotely from Boston. Hope you enjoy the first episode of Montserrat Moves. Be sure to tune in every Wednesday at 5 p.m.